Hey, welcome back. And if you're new here, my name's Christina Kent, and I'm a fine artist based out of San Francisco. In this video, I want to talk about something important in color theory, specifically color temperature. In the past, when I would think about the colors of a painting, I would usually think about things like saturation and value. So saturation, how bright, how chromatic the colors are, value, how light or dark the colors are, and that's kind of what I thought when it came to color theory. But there's another important thing when it comes to color theory that also can have a big impact on our paintings, and that is color temperature. So in this video, I want to talk about how you can use color temperature to completely transform the feel of your painting. I'm going to walk you through a simple exercise where you can better understand color temperature, and it can also help you see how color temperature can impact the mood of a painting. And I hope that this video gives you some ideas on how you can use color temperature in your own work to make your paintings even more compelling. But before we get into that, just a quick note. I recently launched a new portrait painting course on my website. In this course, we take the portrait and we break it down into simple light and shadow shapes. So if you want to see the step-by-step, real-time process for my portrait painting, be sure to check that out. All right, let's get to it. So first, let me just quickly introduce color temperature. So color temperature, from my understanding, is this idea of how warm or cool a color is. And the way I simplify this is that warm colors are more orange and cool colors are more blue. So if you look at the color wheel, we can see the colors that are closer to orange, like red and yellow, those are usually warmer, and we can see the colors that are closer to blue, like green and purple, that are usually perceived as cooler. Also, within colors, so if we're looking at reds, we can define some reds as a warmer red, that is, they lean more towards orange, or a cooler red, that is, they lean more towards blue. Maybe they're a little purpley. For example, cadmium red is usually seen as a really warm red, while alizarin crimson is seen as a much cooler red. For this exercise, we're going to be painting a simple still life, and we're just going to be using 3 colors. We'll use a warm color, so we're going to use raw sienna, which is a very warm brown. We'll use a cool color, in this case I'm using phthalo turquoise, which is a very cool blue, and then we'll use some titanium white to help us shift the value of these colors. We're going to use these 3 colors to mix a series of warm grays and cool grays. And then we're going to make 2 separate paintings, shifting the color temperature in each to see how it impacts the overall painting. All right, let's check it out. Okay, so first let's prepare our palette. So for this, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be using titanium white, or probably any white that you have on hand will work for this. We just want something that can help us adjust the value of the colors that we're going to be mixing. Then we want a warm color, so here I'm going to be using a burnt sienna, but you could also use like a cadmium orange would work really well, just some nice warm color. And then for the cool color, I'm going to be using a phthalo turquoise. So probably any blue that you have on hand will work well. Phthalo turquoise is a very cool blue. The one thing is that it's a very strong color, so if you're using it, keep that in mind. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to mix 4 grays in each temperature. So we're going to have 4 warm grays and 4 cool grays. So what I do here is I kind of lay out some of the white that's going to go in each of the grays, going from the lightest to the darkest, so most white to least white. And then for the warm grays, which are going to be my top ones, I put a little bit of the burnt sienna on the mixture, and then I add a tiny bit of the phthalo turquoise, because as I said, it's a very strong color. Then I'm going to mix them up and get some nice mixtures from that, adjusting as necessary, but trying to create a nice warm gray, or at least neutral tone. These ones ended up being very warm, so you can think of them more as just like a neutral. But if you have it closer to gray, that also works. We really want to be able to distinguish the warm tones from the cool tones. So as I go to the second row, I'm mixing in a lot more of the phthalo turquoise and a lot less of the burnt sienna. So as you can see, the top row of colors that I've mixed are much more brown, they're much warmer, and then the bottom row is more towards green or cooler. Oh, and I also wanted to mention that I got the idea from this exercise from the painter Amy Erickson. She's a fantastic painter and painting instructor. So if you haven't seen her work, be sure to check it out. I'll put her info in the description. So now we've mixed 4 values of warm tones and 4 values of cool tones. So we're going to take these mixtures and we're going to use them to paint this pear. It's a simple still life, and if you want to paint along, you can paint from this image. If you want to paint your own image, that's also great. I would recommend something simple so that it doesn't take too much time, but you can still get a sense of the exercise. And we're not going to be too worried about color here, so converting the image to black and white can be really helpful to just help you see the values. So once you've selected your image, then take that image and make 2 identical drawings where you break it down into 4 values. And if you're not familiar with doing a value study, you can take a look at one of my videos, or you can just follow along with how I've drawn the pear here and use that. Okay, so now that we have our drawings ready, let's start painting. For this first painting, the one on the left, we're going to use cool shadows, but we're going to make the highlights warm. So this means that for the shadows, since it's a 4-value painting, I'm defining the shadows as the 2 darkest values and the lights as the 2 lighter values. So for these 2 dark values, I'm going to be using the 2 darkest values from the cool colors that I've mixed. So that very dark, sort of neutral blue, and then that slightly lighter turquoise blue that I've mixed for the cool colors. These are going to be my shadows for this painting. So as you can see, I've used my darkest cool color for the darkest shadow right where the pear is touching the table, and also for the stem, which appears quite dark to me. And then I'm using the slightly lighter cool color for the part of the pear that's in shadow, and also the shadow that it's casting on the table. And as I'm painting, I realize I haven't made the darkest color quite dark enough to create the contrast that I wanted to see. So I go in and I darken that mixture a little bit more. I also realize that I haven't mixed very much paint to cover the surface. So I go in and I mix some more paint. So then once I've put in those shadows, then I start to add the lights. And for this, now I'm moving to the warm colors that I mixed on that top row, and I'm using those first 2 sort of batches that I've mixed. So that really light warm color and then the second lightest warm color. So I put in the second lightest color first, which is mostly what I'm seeing on the part of the pear that's getting hit by the light. And then I reserve the lightest color for the table and the background, which in my case are a pretty bright white, so I want to keep it very light. Now, even though in my photo reference the table and the background are almost white, I don't use a pure white for this, because if you'll notice, titanium white can feel very cool, and at least I've heard other people say that it's a cool white, and in my experience it does seem fairly cool. So if I were to just put titanium white for the highlight, it might come across as a cool color. And since I want all of the light in this demo to be warm, I'm using my lightest mixture still has some of that warm burnt sienna in it, and also a little bit of the turquoise, so it's not all just warm, but it's a little bit more neutralized. So I fill in the background with this lightest color, and as you can see, it's not a very detailed painting, but we're getting a bit of the effect of the form of the pear, and hopefully we can get this sense that it's being hit by some light and then it's casting a shadow. So even though we don't have much detail, we're still getting that light and shadow effect. And also, even though I didn't include it in the drawing, I felt like it needed a little bit of a highlight on the pear itself, so I also put in some of that lightest light color of the warm colors to create a bit of a highlight effect on the pear. And that finishes up the first painting. So we were using cool shadows and warm highlights. So now I'm moving to the second painting, where we're going to be doing exactly the opposite, where we have warm shadows and cool highlights. So now for this painting, as you can see, I'm dipping into the darkest warm color that I've mixed, so that dark warm brown, and I'm using that to create or to block in where the darkest shadows are on the pear. And then once I've put in the darkest colors, then I go in to put the second darkest colors. So I'm still working from my warm colors, but now I'm putting in the slightly lighter values. So the part of the pear that's in shadow, and then the shadow that it's casting onto the table. And if you're like me, especially if you're painting on an absorbent surface like this oil paper that I'm working on, you might need to mix some more of your colors too, just to cover the surface. So I put in my second darkest value, which is still a very warm brown. And then once I've put in the darkest shadow and the second darkest shadow, then I move to the lights. So now I'm going to be using cool lights. So we're going back down to the cool colors that we've mixed, but instead of going to the darker values, we're going to be using those two lighter values that we mixed. So I'm going to go to my second lightest value first and fill in the part of the pear that's being hit by the light. And then I'm going to go to my lightest value of the cool colors that I've mixed. So this is the titanium white with a little bit of phthalo turquoise and a tiny bit of the burnt sienna. You could also potentially just use titanium white here because, as I mentioned, it is seen as a cooler white, but I like to have a little bit more of that phthalo turquoise because I think it gives you a better sense of it makes it even cooler and it gives you a stronger sense of that color temperature. So I mix a lot of that lighter color and I use that to fill in the background of the table and the wall behind the pear, that bright white surface. And as I'm finishing this painting, you can begin to see the differences between these two paintings. And I think it's really fascinating because here we have two paintings. It's the same subject, the same composition. We're also even using the exact same three colors for both paintings. And yet both of these paintings look completely different. So as you're working on this exercise, think about how you react and how you respond to these paintings and to these color combinations, because I find that when we have a warm light and cool shadows, the mood and the feeling of the painting is so different from when we have cool light and warm shadows. When I look at the painting on the left that has warm light and cool shadows, I think of a warm sunny day. I think of golden hour and that warm light towards the end of the day, and to me it has kind of this soft cozy feeling to it, versus when I look at the painting on the right that has cool light and warm shadows, I'm thinking more of like artificial light, and overall it does feel a little bit colder when I look at it. But that's just my personal reaction. I think your reaction can be totally different. And I think that that's the amazing thing about color temperature, is that we took, like I said, the same subject, the same composition, the same three colors, and yet we're able to create two paintings that have completely different feelings just by manipulating color temperature. And there's definitely more that can be said on color temperature. I feel like I could go on and on about it. It's so complex and interesting. So let me know if you want to hear more videos on that. But in the meantime, I hope that this exercise has given you a peek into how you can use color temperature to change your paintings and to impact things like the mood and the feel of your work. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. And as always, a huge shout out to my supporters on Patreon. Thank you guys so much for supporting these videos and making them happen. If you like my art, if you like my videos, and you want to help me make more, check out my Patreon at the link. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.